I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announcing his resignation Thursday following a series of scandals marking an end to a tumultuous 3 years in which the now former Conservative Party leader oversaw the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union, as well as its response to the pandemic and, more recently, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For more on Johnson's departure and legacy, I'm joined by Wall Street Journal columnist and editorial board member Joe Sternberg. So, Joe, Johnson achieved a historic victory for the Tories in 2019, campaigning to finish the job on Brexit. 80-seat majority broke through in districts that they never had one before, always gone for Labour. Why did it turn sour so fast?
Well, the immediate reason was a couple of scandals that Boris Johnson became involved in, some of them to do with parties that he and his staff hosted during the coronavirus lockdowns, another to do with allegations of sexual harassment against a member of his party and what he had known about it. The bigger problem, though, is the economy, which has really been struggling over the past year. Inflation is mounting. There's a major cost of living crisis. Households are seeing their energy prices go up by 50% at one go this past April. Boris Johnson raised the payroll tax by 2.5% in the middle of that. I think that there was this growing sense that voters were losing confidence in Boris and in his Conservative Party to manage the economy. And I think that that made voters more sympathetic to the argument that the scandals were a good reason to get rid of him.
Well, that economic problem, I agree with you. I think that's a lot of it here. And I guess the question is, why wasn't Johnson more of a traditional Tory in his economic policies? I mean, they're supposed to be the party going back to Thatcher of free markets and fiscal responsibility, low taxes. Johnson went the other direction. Why?
Well, a big part of it was the lessons that they thought that they had learned from the 2016 Brexit referendum when the UK voted to leave the European Union. And I think that there was a school of thought within the Conservative Party, and Boris was a big proponent of this, that what they really needed to do was find ways to connect with blue-collar or working-class voters, especially in the north of England, which is an economically deprived area, and that the way to do that was to focus on a lot of income redistribution programs. They called it the leveling up agenda, although they never really defined exactly what they meant by that. And so they would kind of step away from the Margaret Thatcher-style focus on prosperity through free enterprise and entrepreneurship and take a much more paternalistic approach to the economy. And the problem with that is that those former Labour Party center-left voters might have kind of been willing to give the Tories a shot, but at the end of the day, they didn't really believe that the Conservatives meant it. And meanwhile, the economic results were so bad. We do have the cost of living crisis, the higher energy prices, the sense that economic growth is becoming more tenuous now.
I wonder if there's also a lesson here on climate policy, because Johnson has been a major supporter of climate change policies, subsidies for renewables, punishing with taxes and regulation fossil fuels. You mentioned the surge in energy prices. Is there a broader lesson here about climate change policies and the risks they pose politically, especially to conservative parties?
Oh, that absolutely has a lot to do with it, because Boris's embrace of the climate change agenda, and especially net zero carbon emissions targets, was a big part of this attempt to shift the Conservative Party toward the left. And they thought that that would improve their appeal to some urban voters who might traditionally have also been inclined to vote Labour. But the problem is that the policies just turn out to be unworkable. And I think that when voters see a Conservative Party pursuing policies that are just such a failure in terms of the higher energy costs that they inflict on households, the fact that they don't even necessarily seem to be very effective at controlling the carbon emissions that they're supposed to do, it really dents the Conservative Party's traditional reputation for sheer competence, which was also always part of their appeal that Boris has squandered over the past year or two.
Any lessons here for American conservatives? There's a debate in the Republican Party, for example, about whether to go with Johnson's direction on climate and particularly on social welfare and income redistribution. Marco Rubio and others favoring higher taxes on business in order to subsidize payments, tax credits, and other payments to the working class voter that Johnson tried to appeal to.
Well, the key thing that the British conservatives forgot is that the party on the right in a system like this needs to be the party of economic growth, and that's what voters expect for them, and that's what voters trust that party to do. And I think that you saw over here that as the Tories moved leftward, voters just didn't believe the sincerity of that. So it created this credibility problem that wouldn't have existed if the conservatives were really focused on their core strengths on growth. And I think that that's a lesson that Republicans in the U.S. should definitely be keeping in mind.